Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Delta Report. Today is Thursday, the 18th of November, 2021. Thank you guys for tuning in. Now, this is going to be an important show, and you might want to listen carefully. Maybe, I don't know, if you're not really into finance, you might not understand it that well, why it's so important. But if you listen carefully, you'll find out this is extremely important. They had back at the beginning of this pandemic, back a while ago, they had a crisis. It was probably actually within the financial system that was parallel to what happened in 2008, but it wasn't publicized near as much as what happened in 2008. And what they did, the actions that they took in the finance markets, quite literally averted that crisis and restored normalcy to the markets. But in doing so, what they've done is they've done a long-term break. In other words, they've broken the debt market, the U.S. Treasury market. They've basically broken it. Now it's broken at this point. It's a broken market, but it hasn't been fixed. They've been just running it along all this time with artificial means. In other words, life support, the Treasury market. But the Treasury market is one enormous market, and it's big. It's bigger than the stock market. It's the big boy out there, but it's broken right now. And in order to, something very, very dire is in the works. Let's just put it that way. And this could very much adversely affect the price of your bitcoins and your cryptocurrencies. Depends on what the Fed does. Honest to goodness, everything within the financial system right now is run by the Fed, and it depends on their actions. We don't really have markets anymore. We have Fed policy. And let's get right in there. And now that I've led you guys into this, I'm going to start to show you what it is. I'm also going to talk about how Bitcoin in the future is very likely to actually absorb the value that's in the fiat currencies, more so than ever before. This is likely to happen. But let's get in there and let's open up the charts and examine this in depth. Now, two presidents have just come on and they've hit the alarm. They're speaking right now about what really happened. What did happen? And of course, they put it in financial terms or in financial language, but I've worked at this job for so long, I can understand financial language, and I'll try to explain it to you guys, what they're actually talking about as I go along here. New York Fed President John Williams, he's put out this warning to markets, and he said right here, very careful, very much a statement here. He says, the Treasury market is not as resilient as it should be. This is a warning, guys, from John Williams, New York Fed president. The Treasury market is not as resilient as it should be. Now, I think he's pointing toward right now, in this time frame right now, he says, and that even modest stresses can break it right now. And yes, these Treasury yields cannot move for now, at this point, without breaking the markets. So, we've went to a position where, not long ago, I've explained this to you guys, like, to explain it to you guys really well, I have to use an analogy. And this is an analogy I used before. The Fed has a mechanism. Picture a train, and there's an enormous mountain. And the train's coming down the mountain. It needs to have brakes to slow it down. Otherwise, it'll go faster and faster and faster until it flies off the tracks. Okay? So they got a brake to slow the train down. They pull a lever, and it slows the train down. Like when the train starts to go 80 miles an hour, it slows it down to 70, and then they let the train speed back up to 80, and then they slow it back. This is a runaway train now at this point. That's what the Treasury market is. And the brake that they use is the brake that they use to control inflation. This is the brake. They pull the brake back on the train, and it controls inflation by raising interest rates. Because this treasury market's broken now, and they're admitting it, they cannot control inflation with that brake. But their talk of taper is saying, hey, we can use the brake. But they can't use the brake because the market's broken. So let's read on here. It says, New York Fed's Williams was first, by patting himself on the back and saying that the Fed's bazooka quantitative easing unleashed at the onset of the pandemic, along with prompt physical measures enacted by Congress and emergency steps taken by the Federal Reserve and other government agencies, ultimately proved successful at restoring functioning of the Treasury and other financial markets. You get what he's saying here? Restored functioning. Do you remember the market was in a free fall at the beginning of the pandemic? This is the non-functioning that he's talking about when he's talking about restoring functioning. Restoring functioning in the Treasury and other financial markets. In other words, this whole thing was collapsing. The system was collapsing. And it was their action, which was a Fed bazooka quantitative easing unleashed at the onset of the pandemic, along with prompt fiscal measures. In other words, do you remember all those stimmy checks and stuff? Enacted by Congress and emergency steps. You see, they're admitting it now. Emergency steps taken by the Federal Reserve and other government agencies proved successful at restoring functioning of the Treasury and other financial markets. You know, I mean, a lot of people, he can make a statement like that. This is going to go over a lot of people's heads, but I'm going to explain it to you guys in depth here. This was a situation that was probably not unlike 2008. A financial crisis was occurring, and it kind of passed by all of us because they fixed it without us even knowing that they fixed it. But what they've done is they've created a situation now at this point. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that situation. And he goes on to say, and while these measures averted what could have been a severe financial crisis, in other words, a 2008 event, they averted it, that would have, he goes on to say, that would have devastating effects on the economy. And he says and goes on to say about what they did. They are also a stark reminder that these markets are not nearly as resilient as they should be. In his next statement came dangerously close to the truth statement. Now, it goes on here, he says, one thing that is clear while examining the causes of these market disruptions is that they were not primarily driven by economic forces. So, he's talking about the situations going on in the world with the pandemic and other things. He says, but rather by a failure of the markets to function in the ways they were expected to do in response to these particular circumstances. In other words, this whole thing is an enormous mess. It's basically what he's saying is the financial system now, even though it appears to be running good and everything, it's actually an enormous mess out there, and they have the Treasury market now doesn't have any checks and balances anymore. In other words, the brakes on the train are busted, and they're still broken right now. He said, failing to mention that the Fed owns a quarter of all treasuries up till now, has been monetized every dollar in debt sold by the Treasury since March 2020 in the process of becoming the only marginal price setter in the bond market. So it's the United States government that now is the only real buyer of treasuries. Okay. Up next, now we got more than one speaker here at the Fed that is spilling the beans on all of this. Up next was Cleveland's President Loretta Mester, sorry, who said that with no uncertainty related to the pandemic, many investors sought to move to cash and even liquidated their positions in U.S. Treasuries that are seen as safe haven assets, showing how uncertain the environment was in March of 2020 and necessitating Fed actions to reestablish functioning of that market. So what's going on here? I'm going to get to the nitty-gritty of all this for you guys right now. What's going on here is the U.S. Treasury market is now broken. And the Federal Reserve is talking about a taper. I think that they know that they can't do a taper, ultimately. But by speaking about a taper and showing signs that they can use this braking mechanism, in other words, let's just put it this way. I know a way to explain it to you guys. The train is coming down the mountain, and both brakes are broken, right? But the conductor out there, he's trying to keep everybody calm that's on board the train by he's telling them all over the announcer. He's got the microphone up. Ladies and gentlemen, on the back of the train, everything's going to be just fine. I'm going to pull the handbrake very soon, when he knows the handbrake's completely broken. Okay? So he tells them all, I'm going to pull the handbrake very soon. He's telling them all that because he wants to keep them calm. He doesn't want them to be stressed. But what's going to happen very soon is the train's not going to slow down. Everybody in the back of the train's calm now because they think the train's going to slow down. It's still coming down the mountain. But actually what's going to happen is the train's actually going to speed up. When it's found out by the people out there that this handbrake is broken, right? Then what we're going to see is we're going to see the inflation increase and move toward hyperinflation. Now that is one scenario that could happen. The second scenario is that they're not lying. The Fed and the chiefs of the Fed, Powell is not lying. He is going to try to use the handbrake. What'll happen then if they try to use the handbrake? In other words, if they try to slow this train down by allowing interest rates on the long end of the yield curve to rise, we would have a deflationary crash like you've never seen before. So this is up to the Fed, actually, and up to what they do. They're talking about pulling the handbrake. If they actually pull the handbrake, in other words, they let interest rates rise, we're going to have a crash in this economy like it's never seen before. And then they'll have to come in and restore things again. And in doing so, we're going to head into hyperinflation much quicker. But if they decide, if this is all just them talking about pulling the handbrake, trying to calm the rest of the passengers in the train down, in other words, they talk a mean game about how they're going to taper, and they don't taper, then what's going to happen is we're going to move toward hyperinflation, but a little bit slower. The bad effect upon Bitcoin is if they really do pull the handbrake. And we're going to have a very negative compounding effect about Bitcoin. It won't kill Bitcoin and the cryptos. See, when I'm talking about Bitcoin, I'm talking about Bitcoin and all the cryptos. It won't kill it. It will not kill it. But it could really knock the wind out of the sails. It could really knock Bitcoin for a loop. A massive loop. Okay? So we're actually going to have to wait and see. What do I think the chances are of them actually pulling the handbrake? In other words, allowing interest rates to rise? I think it's very slim, quite slim. But I do have to take that into consideration that it could happen, which would cause a massive financial situation. Probably this is all talk. But why? Why the talk? Why are they saying, okay, we're going to taper if they know they can't? It's because they want to keep that confidence for as long as they can in the United States dollar. But at this point, they're only buying time. Ladies and gentlemen, we are heading toward hyperinflation. There's two scenarios here, or a division, or a fork in the road. One scenario leads us into hyperinflation faster, and that's where we have a financial crisis that triggers the hyperinflation. The other scenario is that we slowly slide into hyperinflation slower if the Fed is just bluffing about the taper and they don't really do it. That'll be the slow road to hyperinflation, and it could take quite a little bit longer to get there. And of course, with the slow road, you're going to see a slow rise in the price of Bitcoin over the next, in other words, hodl, guys, hodl your Bitcoin. If we get the crash, you could actually see Bitcoin prices really drop big time if we get the crash. In other words, if they decide to really taper and decide to try to pull back on their bond purchases, we'll see interest rates rise because nobody's going to buy this crap. There's nobody out there except the Fed that's going to buy this crap now at this point. That could create a buying opportunity coming up in cryptocurrencies, because ultimately cryptocurrencies are going to win in the end. I can see that now. They're becoming more and more functional all the time. Take a look at what just happened with Bitcoin, with the with your Taproot that's just come along. It's going to increase the functionality of Bitcoin probably by the power of 10. You got Lightning Network, smart contracts, and everything else. This is the way of the future, is cryptocurrencies. Well, you're saying, what about gold and silver? What will happen to gold? Well, gold and silver are going to be going through shortages in the upcoming years. And we're going to see the price explode to the upside of gold and silver. At the same time, it's going to make it a fantastic investment. But cryptocurrencies is set to be a fantastic investment too. So, you know, ultimately, guys, gold, silver, cryptocurrencies, you guys are going to be rewarded in such a big way. It's unbelievable. The people who have listened to my show for all these years. You've got to be a little bit patient because this is playing itself out. The treasury market's now broken. It's broken. And it cannot be fixed. That means the US dollar's broken, and the dollar is going to go into a hyperinflation, probably. See, time in this thing. I've always been wrong about time in it. When I first started this channel, I saw hyperinflation was coming because it was in the math that it had to happen. And so I started warning people out there. But I thought it was going to happen in the first 2 years of my show. I thought I have 2 years or less left. Well, I'm still thinking the same thing, and this is like 6 years later. I'm still thinking we got 2 years left or less. They've been able to drag this thing out longer than I ever thought possible. Well, perhaps it'll drag out a bit longer. But ultimately, these things, Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, the gold, the silver, is going to be slowly making you guys rich. And if you guys aren't in right already, you should get in, because this is far from being over. This is just actually beginning. You are on the ground floor. Quite seriously, you are on the ground floor right now. This is just beginning. Do you realize, have any realization how much of everything is stored in these fiat currencies? And as this comes down, how much wealth transfer is going to occur? You're on the ground floor right now. The elevator's going to go up very soon. Like timing, I'm telling you guys, timing's hard for me. But I know this is coming. And all you guys that are in these things, stay in. And if you can possibly accumulate more, because that's the richer it's going to make you guys. Quite seriously. It's going to mean your retirement. Your bank account is not going to mean your retirement. I don't care if you got $10 million in the bank right now for retirement. That ain't going to be what's going to make it. What's going to make it is these non-dollar denominated assets that you're out of the dollar into, like cryptocurrencies, gold, and silver. That's what's going to make your retirement. Listen, guys, I'm telling you guys, nothing like this has ever happened before in world history. We have never, ever seen a time like this before in world history where you can actually get into something that a worldwide hyperinflation. This is unreal. I'm not even gone into this morning how this is going to affect the world or impact the world on a one-to-one basis when this actually happens. But there's no way out of this. We are going down a dead-end street toward this, and there is no way out. We're going to reach the end of the road. It's just a matter of, like I said, a little bit of timing when it's actually going to happen. So this gives me time to get you guys in, so that you guys are going to be safe when this thing hits, or relatively safe compared to other people out there who are going to, this is going to break the finances. So many people around the earth are just going to get caught unawares by this. But right now, the treasury market's broken. Can you imagine? Okay, listen, guys. You guys have a great day. Thank you for tuning into the Delta Report. I love my audience out there. Love all you guys watching my show. Thank you very much, and we'll catch you guys in the very next episode. Bye-bye.